Just minutes ago, I finished watching the game between Uruguay and France in Pool A of this year's Rugby World Cup, and in this video I'm going to review that game. Some surprises coming up. Hello and welcome to Inside Rugby. My name is Mark. I'm a Kiwi rugby fan who's living here in beautiful Cancun in Mexico, and I've made this channel to follow rugby across the world. Not only the Rugby World Cup, I'm going to be doing a lot of games after the Rugby World Cup, but for today it's all the focus on the Pool A game between Uruguay, playing their first game in this year's Rugby World Cup, against France, who had that win against the New Zealand All Blacks last Friday to kick off this year's tournament. And the score in that game last week was 27 points to 13. A little bit significant today, we'll see later on in the video. But this was the first game ever played between Uruguay and France in a test, and it was going to be playing at Lille in France, in the northern part of France, which is more renowned for its football, the soccer kind of game rather than rugby. So Ben O'Keefe from New Zealand, along with a number of other Kiwis, were the officials for this game today. And it was going to be interesting to see how they went, of course, compared to all the other referees we've seen so far in this tournament. Now, before the game got underway, some interesting things. First of all, I looked at my community page on my channel to see all of your opinions when it comes to the poll for this game. And there was a unanimous decision that France were going to win this game very, very comfortably. In fact, I think somebody put a prediction of 105 points to 0 to France. I don't know whether they were taking the out of that or whether it was a serious prediction. However, most of the scores that people were predicted were seeing France winning by 30, 40, 50 or even 60 points in this game. A lot of eyes were on how the Uruguayans were going to be able to deal at set piece play. I thought the French line out and scrum against the All Blacks was pretty good, and I wanted to see how they compared with this team that they'd put on the pitch, to see what the depth is like within this French team. So that was something I was looking out for. And in the first 3 minutes, it ended up a scrum penalty, in fact, to France, and Melvin Geminet, who was playing at fullback, got up and kicked the goal to put France ahead 3 points to 0. But then just 4 minutes later, something fantastic happened to this game, not only for the game itself, but also for the confidence of the Uruguayan team. After a great kick pass across the field to the right-hand wing, Freitas, the winger for Uruguay, went in to score a fantastic try, and the whole French crowd went silent at that time. Uruguay in the lead after 6 minutes. Unfortunately, the conversion attempt was an absolute shocker, but Uruguay were in the lead against France after 6 minutes by 5 points to 3. And this started to look very, very interesting. In that first 10 minutes or so, I was a little bit worried by the Uruguayan scrum. They were getting absolutely pummeled by the French team, and I thought if this carries on throughout the game, we are going to get that cricket score that many people had predicted. But interestingly enough, that wasn't the case, and the Uruguayans seemed to get over the nerves or the instability or just getting the rhythm of the game. And they started to use their scrum in a good way and in a very strategic way. They waited for the French to put on the power, and they earned penalties from the referee for France putting the power on too soon in the scrum. And I thought that was a very clever strategic play from the Uruguayans to get those penalties from the referee. But on the 11th minute mark, France went on the attack again. They came out to the right hand side. Hastoy, the first 5 for France, went over for a good try, and France were back into the lead of this game. And it was a good bounce back from France. They looked very dangerous when they did get a break, and the Uruguayan defence looked a little bit brittle there in the first few minutes as well. So again, the confidence went back onto the French side, and they went ahead 8 points to 5. Geminet got the conversion of the try from Hastoy, and France were ahead then 10 points to 5. France were getting down into the Uruguayan 22 on a regular basis, and they were milking some good penalties while down there. And from another scrum infringement, Geminet got another opportunity to kick for goal. He was successful, and France went ahead 13 points to 5. And at this stage of the game, you kind of thought that France were just going to keep the pressure on, keep the set pieces strong, and then earn the right to go wide and use their powerful and very experienced backline to take on the Uruguayans, but it didn't quite work out that way. Then we got to the 27th minute mark of that first half, and a huge moment in the game that gave Uruguay a lot of momentum. The French forward Tagliaferri went off with a yellow card, an indiscretion high shot that didn't lead to a further red card, so he just went off for the 10 minutes. But all of a sudden France were down to 14 men, Uruguay were getting their tails up, and it was game on in Lille. Now unfortunately Uruguay weren't able to take advantage of France being down to 14 men, and I've got to say that at this stage of the game I started to put a label on the Uruguayan team as being disruptors. The game was pretty messy and France couldn't get a good flow on, and I think between the fact that this was pretty much a brand new French team compared to the team they put out against the All Blacks, they weren't able to get rhythm in the game. And there was two reasons. I think because those players hadn't played for a while, but secondly Uruguay were putting a lot of pressure and disrupting the French, particularly at breakdown, and they were doing very, very good at that indeed. Also, what I started to notice was in the Uruguayan backline, the back three were playing very, very good, and Freitas in particular wasn't shy to get into rucks and mauls and try to win breakdown ball for the Uruguayans. And their coach actually said before the game that the Uruguayans are very good at interchanging different positions, and that started to show in that first half. And in the last 10 minutes of the first half, the French won a number of penalties where they chose to put the ball into the corner and try and reap some rewards that way over this Uruguayan team. So I felt they left a lot of points on the table with penalty kicks that could have been, that they chose to go after Uruguay. And Uruguay were brilliant at being able to shut the French down and actually not turn any of those opportunities into points. So as we headed into half time, the penalty count against Uruguay was 9-4. The score was 13-5, and I bet just about everybody watching this video, except from the Uruguayan fans, probably expected France to be a lot further in the lead than 13-5 at half time. Uruguay had done a very, very good job in that first half. I thought their scrum half, Areto, played very well in the first half. Amesha at fullback was brilliant. He came into the line a couple of times, made a fantastic couple of breaks, and really, really looked the goods for Uruguay. Unfortunately, I think Echeverri at fly half was not so good. He dropped a couple of balls, his passing wasn't very good, and my analysis on that first half was that he was probably the weak link in the Uruguayan backline, particularly to get that backline away, where I think they've got a little bit of talent. I haven't watched Uruguay play before, so this is the first time I've seen them in a test match. And in that first half, I was very impressed with what I saw, particularly with their game plan and the way they brought that up against the French. On the other hand, I think Fabien Galtier would have been screaming at his players at half time. It was a very disconnected and messy first half by France. They didn't earn the right to go wide, and they tried to play very fast ball and play the game at pace. But with this disruptive game from the Uruguayans, particularly their defensive line was very good, and France didn't really have an answer for that in the first half. So overall, I thought that even though they were down on the scoreboard, Uruguay played a very, very good first half of rugby, and France, not so much. They really weren't on the pace they were against the All Blacks. But once again, we've got to remember, this was almost a completely new team for France going out on the pitch. I thought Woki had a good first half for France. Jaminet played well, and Hastoy at fly half was having a reasonably good game without being brilliant. Luku was also, the halfback for France, was really good. He did a couple of really good kicks in the first half, and his distribution was on point. So he was probably one of the standouts for France, I thought, in the first half. It was unfortunate for Uruguay. They didn't score any points while the French had the yellow card, and I think that was a little bit disappointing for them. They went close with a potential try, but it wasn't allowed by the TMO. The other thing I'd say about the Uruguayans' performance in that first half was that they didn't protect the ball very well in the breakdown, and we saw a lot of turnovers to France in that particular area. Unfortunate for Uruguay, because they set up some really good platforms to get the ball out wide and to bring their backs into the game, but they lost the ball at line-out time and also when they went into the ruck. So just that protection of the ball wasn't very good from Uruguay in the first half. But they came out in the second half, and boy, did they start off with a bang. Again, Amasia from fullback coming in and doing a fantastic break, getting right through the French line and heading down towards the French goal line. But again, the discipline of Uruguay let them down, and we had a scrum penalty once again, which gave France the opportunity to clear the ball out. So Fabien Galtier only waited until the 9th minute of the second half before he started to ring the changes. I don't think he was very happy with what was going on in the French scrum, giving away so many penalties. So he made 5 changes at the 49th minute mark, and he brought in a brand new front row. Zealander went off as well, who'd come back from injury, of course, and he played quite well for the 50 minutes that he was on the field. So I think with those changes that the French made, they were hoping to be able to settle that scrum down, bring a bit more power to it, set up the platform so they could then start to use their backs in a bit more of a menacing way. But it was only a couple of minutes after those changes were made by France, and Uruguay made a couple as well, that Uruguay went onto the attack, and boy did they go onto the attack. They came out wide on the 22 line of the French, out on the right hand side, and Amasia went straight through the gap and scored a fantastic try in the corner for Uruguay. And boy, we had a game on then. It was back to 13 points to 10. An absolutely fantastic try by Uruguay. And then Felipe Echeverri got the conversion over, so it was 13-12. And who would have thought after 53 minutes of this game that France would be ahead of Uruguay by only 1 point, 13 points to 12. Put your hand up if you're out there watching this video and you thought that was going to happen. Absolutely fantastic performance to that time by the Uruguay team, and it was really a great try. They made a cutout pass. Amasia found himself out on the right hand wing and he went straight through for the try in the corner. France's defence fell off him. Now, what sometimes happens in games like this, when the smaller rugby nations score a try and there's a lot of emotion around it, the opposing team strikes back straight away, and that's what happened with France. And it was an unfortunate situation because Arata kicked the ball into one of his own players. It ricocheted back, and Malvaca, who'd come on for France, picked up the ball, and there was no stopping him getting to the try line. So within a couple of minutes of Uruguay being behind by 1 point, 13-12, the French had got in for a try and a conversion. So that converted try put France out to 20 points to 12, and we'd had 60 minutes of the game at that stage. So it was going to be really interesting to see what happened in the last 20 minutes of this game. There was a noticeable change in the French play when Malvaca came on. They seemed to bring a lot more power. He was big at the breakdowns, getting a lot of ball. He's a fantastic player, this guy. And France seemed to go up another level, but they always kept making mistakes. And the disruptors, Uruguay, were back in the game by often winning scrum penalties or just getting the ball at breakdown, and they were very, very good at getting in there and disrupting the ball at breakdown. I'm not just talking about their forwards. As I alluded to in the first half, players like Freitas from the back three was getting in there and helping out and getting ball back for Uruguay. Uruguay had a couple of opportunities again, but they kept letting themselves down, unfortunately, just with that last 1% of their skill execution. Either they would drop the ball by rushing the play, or they would lose the ball at a line out when they were in a very offensive attacking position, and that happened a number of times throughout this game. So the Uruguayans were doing a very similar throw in the line out. I think the French were starting to read it, and they were able to get through and really disrupt that Uruguayan line out, which was a shame, because if they'd got clean ball, they may have been able to turn some of those attacks, which were, when they were based in the French 22, could have led to some possible scoring opportunities. They also chose to kick for the corner on a number of occasions, Uruguay, rather than choosing to go for 3 points. And I think that was probably another strategic error. But by that time of the game, we're talking about into the 70th minute, and they were chasing the game, so you can't really blame them for that. 72nd minute, Bilbari went over for France and put the game beyond Uruguay. It was a good try by France. They'd muscle in, they got the ball out from a quick breakdown, came right outside the field, and Bilbari went over for a try. He's a great young rugby player, of course, a good finisher, scores a lot of tries, and we're going to see a long international career from him, of course. He was one of the bolters in this French selection for the Rugby World Cup. The try was converted by Jamini, and France skipped out to 27 points to 12 with about 6 minutes left in the game. Macalou, who was playing really well for the French, kicked a ball through in a breakdown situation, gathered the ball, took off for what would have been a try, but the TMO called it back. The referee had a look at it and made a decision that it was a deliberate kick through in the ruck situation. Not too sure about that one. It looked pretty good to me, but let me know what you think in the comments, as you always do. Let me know whether or not you think that was a fair try to France. It wasn't, according to the referee. So we had a final score of 27 points to 12, and it was a fitting end to the game because the Uruguayans went on to attack again. They played right to the last minute of this game and they left everything out there, and I think they've surprised a lot of people with the way that they've played. And they've got a couple of more games in this Rugby World Cup in the pool section where I think they could be winners, and it's going to be really interesting to see that. For me, Arata at halfback, Freitas and Araisha in the back were really good for Uruguay. Their forwards, I think, let them down a little bit at times without controlling the ball, and they got out scrummaged too many times in this game, conceding penalties, which gave France a let-off in different situations. As I mentioned, Echeverry had an up and down game. He made some mistakes when it came to strategic kicking. He also fumbled a couple of passes, but he did some good stuff as well. So in the end, I'd give him a 50-50 mark in this particular game. For France, I think Luku played really well when he was on in the first half or so for France at halfback. Woki was big until he was substituted as well. He was playing very well at lock, winning ball in the line out for France, and he was pretty massive around the breakdown, as was Macalou as well. Didn't see enough of Macalou. I love that guy. I think he's a fantastic rugby player, extremely fast for a flanker, and I'd like to see him getting involved a little bit more for the French team. I think Gaultier had a few problems with the French front row in this game. They got muscled around by Uruguay at different times, but their discipline was the big problem, and I think they really need to look at that, because the Uruguayans, as I said, they came with a game plan in the forwards and they executed to disrupt that scrum from France. So the score of 27 points to 12 was 1 point worse for Uruguay than what the All Blacks scored against France. And what can we take from this game? Well, I don't think France will be happy at all. I think Gaultier is going to have quite a word to some of these players, and they're not going to see an opportunity, I don't think. And it was really interesting around the strategy of selection for this game, because there's been a lot of talk around this Rugby World Cup with what do the top teams, or the supposed top teams, what do they do when they come up against these lesser or smaller rugby playing nations? Do they put their A team in, or do they give their B team a run? And we're seeing the same thing against tomorrow with New Zealand against Namibia. New Zealand have made a number of changes in that team, and there's a lot of people saying, well, that's a mistake, because we should be seeing the top teams playing consistently, and we've seen Ireland doing that, and maybe they're onto something, because they've also named a strong team, as I think they need to do, to play Tonga this weekend. So that's up for debate. Let me know what you think. Do you think that these teams who are more favoured teams in this year's Rugby World Cup should be putting out stronger teams for every game? Because as we saw today, with 13 changes in that French team, it was very disconnected and messy for a lot of the game. Super impressed with Uruguay today. Can't wait to watch their other games in this year's Rugby World Cup in Pool A against Namibia, Italy and New Zealand. I think they're going to really do themselves proud coming out of the South American Conference. I'm here in Mexico. It's Mexican Independence Day tomorrow, Mexico Independence Day. So to all Mexicans around the world, whether you're here in Mexico or abroad, happy Independence Day for tomorrow. I'll be reporting on the New Zealand-Namibia game tomorrow, so don't forget to hit the subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up, and let me know in the comments. I love to read all your comments about what you thought of this game. Obviously, I missed some things that you probably saw, so let me know what they are in the comments. Were you happy with the way that the French played if you're from France? Or do you think the number of changes that Gaultier put into this team was just asking for this type of performance from France? Some of these players haven't played for a while, and you can really tell how they miss people like Antoine Dupont in this particular team, can't you, after that particular performance. So there we go, another great spectacle in this year's Rugby World Cup, this time from Lille in the north of France. A great game between Uruguay and France, maybe not from a purist point of view, but a great game for the Uruguay nation, their people, their players, their coaching staff. They really put in an immense performance, I thought, today against France, no matter what the spectacle of the game was like. So well done to everybody involved there. Now I'll be back again tomorrow to do a review of the All Blacks playing Namibia, also a Pool A game happening in Toulouse, and that's going to be really interesting to see how the All Blacks and the changes they've brought into their team are performing against Namibia tomorrow. So make sure you stick around and support us here on Inside Rugby. Hit the subscribe button, give us a thumbs up for this video, and don't forget to leave me your comments. I love reading them all as well. So I'll see you again really soon in another video. Until then, stay well, stay safe, and keep enjoying this amazing Rugby World Cup. We've got a huge weekend coming up of rugby.